Hollywood, Florida at the time was a city that was deeply corrupt. You had police that were always being investigated. These cops essentially were operating as a protection racket for the mafia.
We had stolen diamonds, stolen artwork, and they had no problem with that.
Seeing those recordings, I knew it was going to be in for a bit of an extended investigation.
It's the mortal sin of crimes when it's a police officer abusing his authority.
What's wrong with you? You're disgracing a badge.
It's pretty much what we were thinking it was going to be until it gets to the heroin aspect of the case.
There's either right or wrong. There's no gray in between. They were in the big leagues now.
Over 12 police officers will soon be facing federal indictments.
This was the worst case of police corruption ever.
The cops were charged with stealing over $1 million in taxpayer funds.
I went from putting handcuffs on people to having handcuffs put on me.
Throughout the 80s and 90s, South Florida had a reputation for surf, skin, and debauchery.
Miami was more where all the action was, right? The nightclubs and the 20-year-olds and the cocaine.
Just 20 miles north of Miami is Hollywood, Florida. And while it's a beach destination like its more famous West Coast namesake, this Hollywood runs at a much slower speed. By the 2000s, the sleepy seaside town is awash in crooked politicians and cops.
Hollywood, Florida at the time was a city that was deeply corrupt. You had police that were always being investigated. Several high-ranking officers were fired in the early 2000s. The chief fundraiser for the entire city council went to federal prison for money laundering. It seemed like it was a city that everyone was used to this type of corruption.
Corruption often goes hand in hand with organized crime, and Hollywood, Florida is no different. That's why it eventually becomes the stage for one of the most audacious undercover stings of all time. One of the undercover FBI agents on the case, who goes by the alias Dino, remembers the operation like it was yesterday. Growing up in Paulsboro, New Jersey, Dino used to rub elbows with gangsters and wannabes every day as a kid.
I grew up in southern New Jersey. I mean, you just wake up in the morning on Sundays and you smell the sauce on the street, you know, but on one side of the tracks, there was a, different element of a crowd, and on the other side, closer to the river, there was another element. There was a lot of wise guys.
The criminal underbelly of his childhood town leaves a lasting impression.
The thing that I remembered about wise guys, gangsters, were how they dressed, how they walked, how they talked, how they carried their money, how they just presented themselves. It was always calm, professional, respectful.
But when he sees some of his friends get caught up in the life, Dino stays on the straight and narrow.
There's either right or wrong. There's no gray in between. There's no, well, I could do this, then I could do that. That was never an issue with me. I always wanted to be some type of law enforcement officer, whether police, private detective, something to that effect. So I figured, why not go for the top law enforcement agency in the world? And that's why I chose the FBI.
In 1990, Dino lands his dream job, and it's working for the FBI, rolling over informants for cases against the mob.
Once the FBI knew I spoke Italian, they immediately sent me to New York out of the academy to work organized crime and develop informants. They were the priority. I had always the most informants on the squad because they all got along with me. And I think that's why after 5 years, I pushed towards doing undercover work.
As his list of informants grows, Dino's job only gets more dangerous. Soon he is thrust into the dark recesses of undercover work. But that doesn't scare him away. It only motivates him.
I could do this.
The young agent is in the right place at the right time to hone his undercover skills. It's the 1980s, and the mafia presence is strong across America. And in some places, like Hollywood, Florida, the mob presence is hard to miss.
My name is John Holland. I was a reporter in South Florida covering some of the public officials in Hollywood, Florida. At the time, South Florida in general and Hollywood in particular had a reputation as a home to mafia members. So it wasn't surprising to see the FBI looking at Hollywood.
In the late 90s and early 2000s, Dino builds a reputation as a resourceful and reliable agent. In 2004, he gets a call from a seasoned fellow undercover agent named Jack Garcia.
Jack Garcia is undercover agent out of New York. In my opinion, probably one of the best undercover agents the FBI has ever had or will have.
Dino has a lot of respect for Garcia and knows him well.
Gift of gab. People loved him. 6'4", very big, monstrous guy. He called me up because we've worked together several times on numerous undercover operations.
Garcia tells Dino about a police corruption case he's working on down in South Florida.
Police investigations, they're the most difficult cases. The risk is more challenging. It's more being on your guard every step of the way.
But when Garcia goes into more detail about the operation, Dino is intrigued.
A source tells us that 2 police officers helped him escort and sell stolen jewelry from home invasions, and that's how it eventually took off. Is we have cops that are already doing illegal stuff. Cops shouldn't be helping fence stolen property from home invasions.
According to the source, the illegal activity is much more widespread and involves multiple police officers. Garcia spent the past 2 years posing as a fake mob boss so he could find a way to infiltrate the Hollywood PD and see how bad things really are. Now he needs his pretend mob family to grow. It's an elaborate production, and Garcia has a special role in mind for Dino.
Jack was the skipper. He was the captain of the La Cosa Nostra family operating out of New York. I was his right-hand man handling everything down in Florida.
Excited by what seems to be the role of a lifetime, Dino accepts the offer to join. He relishes the mission to root out bad cops.
I have a badge and a disgrace to badge. And that was the motivating factor to me, is to get these individuals that are disgracing their badge, their oath as being law enforcement, and using it illegally. And it was disappointing, it's frustrating, but it's more gratifying to me when that time comes when they get arrested for that.
The operation's primary target is Hollywood police officer Kevin Companion. According to multiple informants, has been providing illegal protection for crooked jewelers for years.
Kevin Companion was a veteran detective, working a detective beat.
Companion was kind of a glad-hander. He had a lot of friends in the department. He was kind of deeply insincere, the type that would go around, try to be everybody's buddy. He was also the type of guy, from talking to restaurant owners, he'd walk in and expect his tab to be paid. He expected everybody to bow to him.
According to FBI sources, for the past few years, Companion has eagerly offered to abuse his badge in any way possible in order to impress the mob. If true, it's a shocking and dangerous situation.
Police officers are given a badge, they're given a gun, they're given the ability to take away your liberty, and in some cases actually take away your life. They're entrusted with that sort of responsibility. They have a higher duty than someone who's just your average citizen.
Creating a fake mob family is not an easy task, but rooting out bad cops is imperative for the FBI. They'll start with Companion, who has already broken the law numerous times.
Kevin Companion was a veteran officer. He had many years on the department, in that same department, and so you couldn't involve the Hollywood Police Department at that point because we really didn't know how far this was going to go. We felt it was very important just to keep it in a closed universe of the FBI and our office and just see where it went. Was there a larger ring of people, or was he an isolated bad actor, so to speak?
In the fall of 2004, Jack Garcia, still posing as the head mob boss, returns to Hollywood. This time, to make his fake cover story seem more legit, Garcia brings his lieutenant, who's played by Dino. Dino creates a phony bio and gets into character.
So my undercover in this case was born in Atlantic City, then eventually moving to Brooklyn, being part of the Brooklyn group. Dino was a made member of one of the crime families. I knew all the odds. I knew about gambling. I knew every casino game there was. And that was my background.
Dino's first job is to try to figure out how to get in with Sergeant Kevin Companion. Garcia makes the introduction.
Kevin was still around, still a police officer. Jack reached out to Kevin again. Hey, how you doing? Let's get together and keep it all social. Let's just hang out.
But fooling a seasoned cop isn't going to be easy.
Jack set up a meeting to introduce me to Kevin. I needed to sell myself to Kevin. If I didn't hit it off with Kevin, or if I said things that I shouldn't have said, he would have spotted it in a heartbeat. I had to be believable to Kevin in order for him to accept me. You only get one take.
One of the hardest parts about being an undercover is making sure your target trusts you. If that isn't there, the whole operation is in jeopardy. Luckily, Dino has had years of developing informants, and he quickly befriends Companion.
Kevin Companion is a very likable guy, funny guy. We had similar backgrounds. That's why we clicked, because his background, my background, the same thing, growing up in an Italian neighborhood.
Over the next few weeks, Dino and Companion hang out, and it becomes clear that the police detective isn't sticking around just to be social. He wants to join the mob. In early 2005, fake mob boss Garcia tests the water to see how far Companion will go to abuse his power. He asks the officer to help with the interstate crime.
After several meetings, that's when he approached Kevin and said, hey, listen, I need something to go up to New York. Can you do it for us?
They actually invited Companion up to Atlantic City for a meeting with a number of the undercovers who were portraying themselves as organized crime figures.
In March, Companion travels from Florida to Atlantic City to meet with who he believes are members of a powerful crime family: Dino, Garcia, and 3 other undercovers. Investigators record the whole interaction.
If you're an undercover, you are recording almost every meeting possible. Unless you feel that, you could have a safety issue, because that's what we give to the defense.
One of the things, obviously, as federal prosecutors, we have to prove is that someone knew that they were engaging in criminal activity. And so the goal here has always been to present it very openly to the police officers that you're engaging in criminal activity, and they can't later say they didn't know it was illegal. And seeing those recordings, I knew it was going to be in for a bit of an extended investigation.
Companion sees his chance to get in good with the mob, and he's more than willing to do their dirty work. In fact, he sets his sights on something even bigger.
Companion had approached them about maybe becoming a made member of the mafia and talked about, wouldn't it be great for you to have a made member of the mafia on the police force?
Our leverage with Kevin is he always wanted to be a gangster. He used to recite lines from The Godfather, The Goodfellas, everything. He wanted to be a mobster. And we kept on dangling that carrot. Kevin would do almost anything for us.
In the spring of 2005, the FBI is investigating allegations of widespread corruption in the Hollywood, Florida Police Department. Undercover agents are zeroing in on one cop in particular, Kevin Companion, whose aspirations to become a mobster seem to be driving the betrayal of his badge.
Now you just have to see if it's systemic, right? Is it in the whole police department? That's what we needed to find out.
In fact, Companion boasts that there's a whole crew of cops ready to do the mafia's bidding, just like him. To prove it, Companion sets up a meeting between one of his fellow cops and what he thinks are mobsters.
The first officer that Kevin Companion brought in to the illegal activity was a motorcycle officer by the name of Jeffrey Courtney.
Jeff was Kevin's right-hand man. Jeff was a likable guy as well, and he was game. He was in 100% to do whatever activity we wanted him to do.
Courtney had very strong ties to higher levels of the department. One of his best friends was a lieutenant. One of them happened to be the PR spokesperson for the department. So by bringing in Courtney, Companion thought he'd have more people higher up in the department to protect them if it went wrong.
With everything in place, Companion and Courtney agree to escort a truck out of Hollywood with what they think is $400,000 worth of stolen diamonds in it.
Courtney's role was actually using his Hollywood Police Department motorcycle and in uniform for someone who's going to be driving with the proceeds from the sale of stolen diamonds to make sure that they made it to their destination safely. To make sure the truck wasn't stopped, no problems occurred.
Companion and Courtney were very happy to help because they wanted to make this mobster happy so that they would keep hiring them, keep giving them money, and give them more power.
For the next illegal scheme, Dino asked Companion and Courtney to transport $500,000 in stolen bonds across state lines from Florida to New York, making it a federal crime.
They went from merely protecting, being there to make sure somebody didn't get stopped, to actually taking a briefcase with the stolen bearer bonds and driving all the way to New York to deliver it to the criminal organization. It was important because our main statute for the corruption required an interstate element, and the ability to be doing criminal activity that went from Florida into the Northeast satisfied that element.
The idea that they were willing to cross state lines shocked me, and at that point I think most people's antenna would have gone up. The mafia is not using a couple local cops in Hollywood to protect their shipment.
Both jobs go off without a hitch, and the cops make easy money. Companion $8,000 and Courtney $3,000.
We had Jeff and Kevin both willing to do whatever they need to do to help us transport some of our items.
I've never seen anyone so willingly commit crimes and happy to do it and want to do more and ask if they can do more, all for very little money.
The operation is risky, and each scenario increases the possibility that the undercover will get exposed. Still, the feds decide to keep the investigation going to see how deep the corruption goes.
So is it just Kevin and Jeff? Well, we didn't know. Kevin always talked about he could get more badges for us. So we created another scenario.
At the time, it made investigative sense to take it up a notch, that they would need a more overt police presence, possibly.
In November 2005, Dino asked Companion if he can recruit more cops for a big job coming down. It's Big Jack's birthday, and he's coming down to Florida to celebrate with a fixed gambling party off the coast of Fort Lauderdale. Once again, Companion delivers. He contacts officers Steve Harrison and Thomas Simcox.
We set up a scenario where we ran an illegal, corrupted poker game, Texas Hold'em.
Dino tells Companion that these cops will serve as protection for the mobsters in case the losers realize the game is rigged and things turn violent.
They had to know they were protecting an illegal venture, and certainly this one impacted that interstate commerce because the gamblers were flying in from all over the country. This was a very big commitment.
We needed security on a boat because if one of these guys lost all their money, got out of hand, we wanted the cops to give us protection. And that's why we need additional cops to help us on the yacht. So we met up Steve Harrison, we met Tom Simcox. Steve Harrison was very big, muscle-bound, physical fitness guy, very by the book. He was always cautious. And then we got Tom Simcox. Here's a guy that's 50 years old, close to 20-year veteran, also helping out. There was no doubt in their minds that we were gangsters, and they had no problem with that. But then we had some problems.
By 2005, the FBI is entrenched in a sting operation to expose dirty cops and keep the sleepy town of Hollywood, Florida safe. In November, the FBI rigs a poker game to collect evidence of police corruption. But sometimes even the best laid plans don't work out, and this one has a major problem.
When we were meeting all the 10 to 12 undercovers, we told them we were going to do an illegal poker game, and we asked, does anyone know how to play Texas Hold'em? Nobody raised their hand.
Surrounded by poorly prepared undercovers, investigators must quickly pivot.
If they're on the yacht with us watching this game, they're going to say, these guys don't know how to play poker. They don't even know how to play Texas Hold'em. We decided at that point to have the cops stay on the dock. We didn't put them on the yacht.
With the opportunity lost, the agents have no choice but to carry out the ruse, now sitting ducks in an intercoastal waterway.
We were playing cards, we were going through the motions. Look, we didn't know if they had other cops doing surveillances on us, right? We had to consistently play that role that this was actually happening. Because how do we know Kevin didn't have 4 other cops just following the yacht?
The evidence collected is lackluster, but the mission is accomplished nonetheless. More dirty cops showed up, knowing they were taking part in illegal activity.
I mean, look, management want to know, are we wasting our time on this case or do we need to move on? they probably would have got suspended. But when we did this scenario to bring out more cops and more cops show up, then we need to continue until it can stop, right? How far was Steve willing to go? How far was Tom willing to go?
You had 2 new officers involved, and so the mere fact that Kevin Companion had brought in these other 3 didn't mean he didn't know other people. You're always trying to build as strong a case as possible.
The case gets stronger in December 2005 when Companion, Courtney, and Simcox transport what they think is $1 million worth of stolen diamonds from Hollywood, Florida to Atlantic City, New Jersey.
We showed them the diamonds. We discussed that they were stolen. Tom, Jeff, and Kevin were all going to drive up together. We pushed with the cops. Okay, you get pulled over. What are you going to say? Well, we'll just throw our badges out.
You're cops. You're supposed to be stopping this. You're not supposed to be participating. So I think when a cop violates his badge, the biggest thing is you see the erosion of confidence, and people say, the cops aren't the answer. We can't trust them.
Companion and his crew are fully embedded with the phony mobsters and are eager to do more. They ask for more gigs, and Companion and Steve Harrison agree to transport stolen artwork across state lines.
We were at the Diplomat Hotel in Hollywood, Florida. I had the best hotel room in the Diplomat, overlooking the ocean. It was beautiful. And I asked Kevin and I asked Steve, are you guys okay with bringing this stolen art up to Atlantic City? Both of them acknowledged what I said. They both said they don't have any issues. After I showed them the art, I saw Kevin grab a towel and wipe down anything that he touched on the suitcase, just so he wouldn't have his prints on the lock or the zipper or anything, in case they were to get pulled over going up 95 to Atlantic City.
To be extra cautious, the cops even have rehearsed an alibi in case they get pulled over and questioned by other police officers.
They said if they separate us, we each have our story, and our story is going to be the same, plotted out every place we were going to stop at going up 95, every state. They were prepared. It made me feel relaxed that the product was going to come up there, but it also dug a deeper hole for them.
After a year undercover, agents finally have hard evidence of transporting contraband across state lines against Kevin Companion and the other 3 police officers and his crew.
We had audio, video every time with them. They had no problem hanging out with us, and they had no problem transporting stuff for us.
It's the mortal sin of crimes when it's a police officer abusing his authority, violating the trust that the community has placed in him. They corrupt the system that they're supposed to help us live in, free of crime.
The ultimate goal of the investigation is to make sure the residents of Hollywood have an honest police force protecting them. Even though these 4 cops can be arrested, agents opt to continue investigating them to determine how clean or dirty the rest of the department really is.
Our next scenario, which we've been working on for the entire case, is the transportation of drugs, and that's what we were just slowly setting them up for. What type of cops are these guys? Are they to the extreme? Are they over the top? Well, we were going to find out.
In 2006, 4 veteran Hollywood, Florida police officers are targets of an FBI sting. The cops think they're doing business with gangsters from New York transporting stolen items across state lines.
They were helping us transport bags of cash. We had stolen diamonds. We had stolen artwork. We had stolen this, stolen everything. These guys were helping us facilitate it. So now we wanted to kick it up a notch.
If you have police officers involved openly assisting in the trafficking of drugs, you have a much stronger criminal case than, let's say, a non-drug case where, yes, they're doing all sorts of illegal activity, but there's a dividing line between that type of corrupt activity and crossing over into the world of drugs.
But crossing that line takes time. And as the investigation enters its second year, Agent Dino begins to experience one of the pitfalls of the job.
Most of the targets, you got to get along with them. So you're on a mission with most of the cases. But the one in Florida, that was different. These targets were likable. These targets remind me of my friends growing up. You build a relationship up, and before you know it, you're sleeping in the same room with them. You're hanging out with them. You're going to dinner and celebrating their son's communion or confirmation. And it gets you so mad that you would want to say, like, what's wrong with you? You're disgracing the badge. It was like Leonardo DiCaprio in Departed.
I'm going f***ing nuts, man. I can't be someone else every f***ing day. It's been a year of this. I've had enough of this shit.
Dino's camaraderie with his targets leads to a momentary lapse of reason.
I wasn't seeing what was right and what was wrong. Kept on telling Jack, like, Jack, these guys aren't that bad. Let me talk to Kevin. I said, Kevin, look, are you sure you want to do this? I mean, you got your kids, you got your wife, your family. And he looked at me and he said, you don't want me to become a gangster? You don't want me to become me? You don't want me to work with you guys? But I'll do whatever you guys tell me to do. I was getting so close with him, too close, but I was able to pull that back.
Dino clears his head just in time to attempt the ultimate scenario, transporting multiple kilos of heroin, a felony that carries a 10-year minimum sentence in the state of Florida. But Companion wants to keep the details quiet.
Kevin did not want us to tell any of the cops what they were transporting, right? What was in the bag. But our explanation to Kevin was, look, we need to tell these cops what they're doing because we want them to know how serious this is. We don't want them screwing up with our items and losing it. But in reality, you know, we need it for prosecution. We had to let them know it was heroin.
Not code words, not allusions to, oh, you know, we're going to be doing that thing tomorrow. Are you in? Because they could claim they just thought they were doing, you know, an unauthorized off-duty, so to speak.
If I don't get these guys on tape knowing that they're transporting heroin, this whole case would have gone dark for me.
On November 29, 2006, Dino and another undercover agent rig a Miami hotel room to capture the recordings.
We had the whole room wired up, CCTV, everything. As soon as they walk in, the first thing Kevin says is, this looks like an FBI sting operation. My heart just dropped. I was like, case over. These guys are going to arrest us. Joe and I looked at each other and we just froze. I panicked. And then we realized that Kevin was only joking. Jeff was laughing. Tom kind of laughed. Steve, not exactly, but he accepted it. But unbeknownst to them, that's exactly what it was. An FBI sting operation.
Dino quickly gets back into character to focus on the evidence needed, but he's very concerned.
I didn't want to say it in that room. Kevin always told us, stop telling us what's in the bags. We don't need to know. Obviously, we had to tell them. I decided to leave the room, walk out on a balcony, and take one person at a time and ask them, are you okay moving heroin up 95? This is serious stuff. I need you to know how serious this is. I specifically had to say the word heroin. And I started with Steve, and I left the last for Kevin. Everything was being recorded inside of the hotel room. But I still had a recorder on me to record that conversation. And each cop responded back and said, I have no problem with it.
It's a huge milestone for the investigation, but Companion is not happy.
So we walked downstairs. I'll never forget this. Kevin lags behind, and he got so pissed off at me, and he said, why did you tell these guys that it was drugs? I told you didn't have to tell them.
If I'm the FBI, to me the ultimate drama was that 24 hours from the time they made no bones, this is our crime, we want you to join us, I'd be very worried that they're gonna go home, sleep on it, and say, no, I can't do this. We've made mistakes, but we're walking away.
On November 29th, 4 Hollywood, Florida police officers agree to help undercover FBI agents move 10 kilos of heroin. It's the culmination of a 2-year investigation aimed at keeping the sleepy seaside town and its residents safe. As time slowly ticks by, investigators wait to see if the cops will show up the next day.
It seemed like it went on forever, but they could have turned that right around for all of us. The next day, they would have got a search warrant and come and arrest us at our hotel room with the heroin in our hotel room. And lucky for us, that didn't happen.
The next day, Companion and crew returned to the hotel, not to make arrests, but to move forward with the plan. And boom.
Having them show up the next day, they actually bought one-way hand radios from Radio Shack. So they each had walkie-talkies. They gave one to me and Jack, and then they took the other radios with them.
It's just hard to believe that police officers could do this and not even stop themselves at any point. They were so comfortable working with the mafia. Every time they had an opportunity to turn back, they wouldn't do it.
Now you got 4 police officers who we need to accept the fact that they're going to help move 10 keys of heroin from one county in Florida to another county.
When we get to Sterling Road in 95, we're going to get off and go have the guy pull into the gas station. I'll pull with them just in case someone's following or something, because then they got to scatter. We'll be able to see if cars are trying to follow.
They were done. They were in the big leagues now.
Ironically, the cops secure the route with the very same counter-surveillance techniques that they learned at the police academy. Except this time, they're used to commit a crime, not to prevent one.
They helped facilitate 10 keys of heroin, and that's beyond my imagination. A police officer would do something like that.
The agents capture it all on video and pass it off to the U.S. Attorney's Office.
This was a big step in the investigation because it had taken us to that level of criminality, and they had knowingly, willingly, intentionally, in exchange for money, participated in helping to move a significant load of heroin. Companion received $10,000 for the heroin deal, Courtney and Simcox $8,000, and Harrison $6,000.
Faced with the dangerous reality of cops willing to run drugs for criminals, authorities decide to double down and try to flip one of them. They hope to identify more corruption within the Hollywood, Florida PD.
We didn't want to leave any stone unturned if there were stones to turn, and a decision was made to surreptitiously approach Thomas Simcox. The agents approached him and asked him if he was willing to cooperate.
The plan was to put a wire on him, and then go approach other senior officers, sergeants and lieutenants, and tell them what was going on and ask for their help. What if we get caught? Will you protect us?
They get Simcox to agree. But before he's about to go in as a mole, the FBI makes a decision that blows the case wide open.
The FBI made the decision to inform the chief of the Hollywood Police Department that, in fact, one of his officers was implicated.
The decision to tell Chief Scarberry about the investigation, in hindsight, was a mistake by the FBI. At the time, I think they were trying to be professional. They wanted to tell the police chief that you have crooked people on your department, you should know about this, and we're going to continue. And also to let them know, your officers are with our undercover FBI agents. From a safety standpoint, if for any reason you move on these officers, those are our FBI agents. These are not mobsters.
But Chief Scarberry betrays this trust, and word of the investigation quickly spreads throughout the department.
Why did Scarberry leak this information? There's no reason to, unless you're afraid there are other cops that didn't get caught up in that. He wanted to shut everything down so there were no eyes on it. And I think the biggest proof is, rather than keeping it to himself, he went to the city manager and the mayor of Hollywood, two officials who had no reason to know about this investigation, but had every reason in the world to leak it so it would shut down and not shine negatively on the city.
It's not long before the news reaches Companion and Courtney.
Jeff and Kevin got tipped off. Now they just moved heroin. They moved other illegal stuff. They're willing to cross the line and do whatever they need to do to save their own ass. Doing undercover work is risky in general. And when you're doing a police corruption case, these guys have guns, right? If they have a sense that you're an undercover for the government, they might just go off the handle and just lose their mind and just come after you.
Instead of going after Dino, Companion and Courtney make a desperate attempt to save their retirement funds.
In Florida, like most states, you lose your pension if you're convicted of a crime. Courtney and Companion raced to the retirement office to put in their papers to retire so that they could protect their pensions, knowing that the jig was up. And two other officers in Hollywood who were not, as far as we know, involved in the crimes, put their papers in early too. They shouldn't even know about this. It goes to the fact that everyone in the department, they had heard about it. They knew they were under investigation.
We moved right away to swear out the complaint and have them arrested.
Finally, in February 2007, after a 3-year FBI sting, Kevin Companion, Jeff Courtney, Thomas Simcox, and Steve Harrison are arrested for possession with intent to distribute 1 or more kilos of heroin.
After the heroin deal, we were happy. But eventually, when we told the Hollywood police and the information leaked out and the case was over, Jack and I were very disappointed because we wanted it to continue.
The first we heard of this was at the time when they were arrested. The New York papers picked it up, the New Jersey papers picked it up, Miami Herald grabbed it.
Upon meeting with Steve for the first time, and prior to getting any of the discovery, the case seemed defensible. Steve was pretty adamant about the fact that he didn't remember any conversation about heroin. The first thing you think of in a case like this is possible entrapment.
In February 2007, after an intricate FBI sting, 4 Hollywood, Florida police officers are arrested by the U.S. Attorney's Office for trafficking heroin. A complete dismissal of the oath they took to protect and serve. Defense attorney Ed O'Donnell meets with his client, Steve Harrison, to discuss options.
There are really only 3 pleas that can be entered: guilty, not guilty, or nolo contendere. In 90-some% of the time, unless there's a prior arrangement, which is rare, at the arraignment everybody pleads not guilty, and we did too. So we looked for an element of entrapment. You look at Steve's background, his clean record, not just as a citizen but as a police officer, and the case could have been what we thought originally was defensible.
But that game plan does a 180 when the state provides O'Donnell with the recordings.
Pretty much what we were thinking it was going to be until it gets to the heroin aspect of the case. Steve did not recall having anything to do with heroin. He said, I wouldn't do that. He believed it until he saw the tapes. The tapes showed otherwise. And that's really the whole case. It would have been hard to convince a jury that Steve had no knowledge that this involved protecting a heroin shipment. He was guilty, and he knew it, and there was only one road to travel, and that was to plead and hope for the best outcome.
All 4 cops plead guilty to conspiracy to possession with intent to distribute multiple kilos of heroin.
The driving factor in this case for sentencing was the drug transaction, and so they all started with essentially the same baseline. In the federal law, a deal of more than 1 kilogram of heroin subjects you to a 10-year minimum mandatory sentence.
Any hope of a plea deal in the courts proved futile, because now the officers are viewed as not allies, but as enemies of the state.
I think when a cop violates his badge, judges in particular are offended, and there's a 0 chance you're going to get a good deal from a judge. 0.
Thomas Simcox is sentenced to 11 years in prison, and both Jeff Courtney and Steve Harrison are sentenced to 9 years. Kevin Companion is sentenced to 14 years in prison.
Kevin Companion received a higher sentence because he had brought in the other officers, and he was the point of contact, organizing the deals essentially between the undercovers and the other officers. As a police officer, his job was to arrest people and stop criminal activity, not protect it. These people are empowered to take your life in certain circumstances. And so they have taken on a higher trust.
Prison sentences not only punish these cops for betraying public trust and breaking the law, but they also act as a warning to all law enforcement officers about what happens when they abuse their power.
And one of the purposes of sentencing in the federal system is not just punishment, but it's general deterrence. You can't violate the law with impunity.
I think it was a huge success in the FBI. It was a huge success with the case agents, the whole group involved in this undercover operation.
So I think at the end of the day, justice was served.